Hello everyone, I'm Alex of Vending Machine Support. In this video, I'm going to show you the different areas and functions that you can test when troubleshooting your Vendo 721 or 621 drink vending machine using the 2nd Gen control board. Now if you found this video useful, I appreciate if you could like and subscribe and make sure you hit that notification bell. Let's get started. Now the Vendo 721 and 621 drink vending machine on the Gen 2 control board has several different test modes available to you to aid with troubleshooting. Those test modes are going to be for test vending, to test the evaporator fan relay, to test the compressor relay, as well as to test the light relay. So I'm going to step you through each of those different test functions and what to look for when performing those tests. But first, the first thing you need to understand is how to navigate the Gen 2 control board on your Vendo drink vending machine. So to do that, we're going to need to press the service mode button on the control board, and I'll show you which buttons you'll be using on the front of the machine to navigate the menu system. So I'm going to open up the door on the machine. And if you separate the inner door from the main door, located in the center of the main door is going to be the control panel. Now on this control panel, there is a circular hole with a button that you have to reach in and push. Now if this is the first time you're ever doing this, you may have to pull the cable out of the way in order to find that service mode button. But once you've found it, you're going to reach in, you're going to press it one time, and come around to the front, and the display should be reading diagnostics. Now I'm going to keep the door slightly ajar. If I close the door all the way on the machine, it will put the machine back into sales mode. So here we have diagnostics on the display. Now to navigate the Gen 2 control board on the Vendo 721 or 621, we're going to be using 4 selection buttons. That is going to be selection button 1 is going to be our cancel or exit key. Selection button 2 is going to be our up arrow. Selection button 3 is going to be our down arrow. And selection button 4 will act as our enter key. So we can navigate up and down on the menu system using selection buttons 2 and 3. So when we want to enter test modes, we're going to look for test modes on the control board. So I'm going to continue to press selection button 2 until I find test mode on the display. Here we have the test mode area. We're going to press selection button 4 to enter test mode. And the first one we come up with is test mode vending. So I'm going to start with test vending. Now this is the simple way to test vend the machine if you have product in there. This way you can watch the products vend and make sure they're dropping correctly with the door open. Now a little tip, the best way to test vend a machine always is to close the door and approach the machine like a customer. Insert money, buy a product. Does it drop? Do you get your change back? Those are the questions you want to ask yourself when you're test vending it. Best way to test vend a machine again is from a customer's perspective. Insert money, make sure every time you insert a coin, the denominations are incrementing correctly, it's showing you the correct credit on the screen. Then you make your selection. Does the spiral turn if it's a snack machine? Does the product drop? Yes, no. If so, do you get change back if you're supposed to have change? So the best way, especially for new vendors, to test vend the machine, again, is like a customer. But on this machine, we can test vend it from a mechanic's perspective with the door open. This allows us to watch all the mechanics of the machine while we're test vending it. So I'm going to go ahead and enter test mode vending by pressing the number 4 selection button. And here it says column 1 on the display. Now here I can press selection buttons 2 or 3 to navigate to the different columns or different selections inside the machine. Now I have loaded 12-ounce cans into selection number 1 or column number 1 in the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and vend test that. So before I'm going to do that is I'm going to take the motor cover off so I can see the motor and I can kind of watch different areas inside the machine. So let me show you how you do that. Now we have a motor cover here located on the Vendo 721 and 621. And the first to do this, remove it, is that it's got 2 screws at the top. We just need to loosen and this panel will come off. So the first thing we need to do is we need to take out the product loader bar or the shelf. Go ahead and this just simply pulls out. Set that aside. And I'm going to go ahead and just loosen these 2 screws at the top. Now we don't have to take them all the way out. We're just going to loosen them and take this cover off, and this exposes all of our Vend motors. Now here on this 621, we've actually got 8 Vend motors total. Motor number 1, motor number 8. This again, motor number 1 is controlling column 1, which is selection 1. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the motor on column number 2 to show you how this mechanism actually works and how the vend process works. So to do that is I'm going to go ahead and unplug motor number 2, and we've got a quick release plug here. Let's take these apart. And then we've got 2 screws at the bottom that actually hold the motor in place. So it's very easy to, if we have a jam, to quickly remove the motor and unjam it. It's very well thought out in the way this machine operates. So I'm going to go ahead and over here, I'm going to go ahead and remove these 2 screws. Now with the motor completely removed, we go ahead and take the motor off. Now this motor simply has we have a drive shaft with a set pin here which will marry up to the coupling here on the Vend motor. So what happens is the motor will turn, and will turn this actuator one direction, and this will come back around, and it's only going to turn about 180 degrees. And once it stops, the board figures that it can't turn anymore, and it will start turning it the other way. Now when it turns the other way, it lifts what we call this gate. Comes around, drops a product, stops there, comes back around, locks underneath the gate, and then here it's going to go ahead and load the cradle. So this is a problem I have seen over time on the Vendo design, is that this little lifter right here, the bottom of these sometimes crack or break. So you may have to actually at some point replace these over time. Very easy to do. Spring comes off and this pulls straight off. If I undo the spring, I'm going to go ahead and pull the lifter right off. So it's very well thought out and very easy to replace these components if they ever do fail. I'm going to go ahead and put that back on. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the motor back on. Now to put it back on is simply going to go, the top part of this motor here is simply going to slide up underneath this. And now you may need to move the cradle to get it to marry up properly. Motor mounted up, we'll go ahead and put these 2 screws back in. And this one here. That motor's locked in place. Go ahead and plug the motor back in. Now I've got the machine on. These are 24-volt motors. I'm not too concerned about being shocked or anything like that because it is relay based, so I'm not too concerned with that. So you can leave the machine on if you're going to be removing these motors. Now we can go ahead and do a vend test. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like behind the motor and how the vend mechanism works and how to quickly replace the lifter bar. Now we're going to go ahead and make a vend test on selection number 1. So the way the Vendo 721 and 621 works is the motor will turn and it's going to load the 4 cans, specifically here because we got 12-ounce cans, we're loading it 4 deep. If it was 16-ounce cans, that would be 3 cans deep. If it was a bottles, usually that's going to be 2 bottles deep. The cradle comes around, it grabs, loads the chamber of the cradle, and at that point it's going to turn the motors until something drops off and hits the chute. Now this has a guaranteed delivery system, so when the product lands on the chute, the computer board picks up that vibration and considers that a completed vend. So the motor will turn slightly and wait for the first product to drop. It's going to be the front can, and then it will stop the motor. And the next vend is going to drop the second can in. The next vend after that is going to be the third can in, and the next vend after that is going to be the 4th can, and then here it's going to come back around and collect the next 4 drinks. So we're going to make a vend test. I'm going to do 4 vends. Make sure that every time I press the selection button to actuate column motor 1 or motor number 1, that we're getting a product. Now, since I've probably been over here working on this motor, the board's probably timed itself out and put itself back into sales mode, so I'll need to go ahead and make my way back into those test modes. So I'm going to sit over here and I'm going to press the number 4 selection button. So under test modes, when it says test mode vending column 1, number 4 is going to activate the motor of column 1. If we had it said column 2, it would activate the motor for column 2. So we're always going to be pressing selection button 4 to execute or create an action. So I'm going to press the number 4 selection button. And here are the vents. Here we go, drops the first drink. All right, I'm gonna press the number 4 selection button again. There, drops the second drink. Press the number 4 selection button again. Drops our third drink. I'm gonna press the number 4 selection button again. Here I've got the last one. And here it came back around. Now after that fourth vend, it just loaded all of the 4 drinks back into the cradle. Now what happens if we don't have any drinks in there? What happens? So because nothing's going to drop on the delivery chute, the motor is going to hunt for a product or see maybe there's a jam. So I'm going to press the number 2 selection button. I'm going to make my way over to column number 2. Since I don't have anything on column number 2, I'm going to go ahead and press selection button 4. And here we're going to see the motor is going to turn, hunt, lift the loader bar. It's trying to look for a product. Again, it's trying to hunt again. Back and forth, it's hunting for the product, back and forth. So the great thing about the Vendo 721, 621 machine, that if nothing drops on that chute, the customer is going to get their money back. So if a product jams up, it's not going to cheat your customer of drinks. So what I did there is that allowed me to make sure that it went and it hunted for a drink. It tried it, says, okay, this is where I should have a drink drop. And the board says, no, nothing dropped. Let's go back and try to reload the cradle, which it did. It did that 3 times and then gave up. That's a good way for us to know that our drop sensor is working on a negative vend as well as a positive vend. Now the next test mode available to us is test mode jog. Under the test mode jog, it does allow us to test the left and right or forward or reverse of the actual Vend motor. So to do that, we must first enter test mode jog. So I'm going to go ahead and leave test mode vending by pressing the selection button 1. Press it 1 time, we have test mode vending on the top display. I'm going to go ahead and press selection button 2 until I find test mode jog. I'm going to press selection button 4 to enter that. Then here I have test mode jog with column 1 on the bottom part of the screen. So here if I press selection button 2 or 3, I can navigate to the different columns or different Vend motors that I would like to test. Go ahead and press the number 2 selection button to move over to column 2 because I have products in column 1 and I want to perform this test on an empty column. So here if I press the number 4 selection button, I'll enter test mode jog for column 2 and I'm presented with forward. Now this allows me to test the motor in the forward direction. If I press selection button 2, it allows me to go to reverse and allows me to test the motor in the reversed function. So when you perform these tests under forward, you'll hold down the number 4 selection button until the motor turns and it will eventually stop. Once it stops, the board will kill power to the motor because it's felt resistance. At that point, you'll switch over to test mode jog reverse and then it will reverse the motor to the opposite direction. And this is all done by pressing the number 4 selection button. You have to press and hold that button to do this. So to test that, I'm going to go ahead and open the door up here and I'm going to go ahead and lift the gate up. And I'm going to press the number 4 selection button and cycle the motor forward. So I'm going to go ahead and press the number 4 selection button and it's going to cycle that motor in the forward direction, excuse me. So I'm going to press the number 2 selection button and I'm going to press the number 4 selection button because now I'm in jog mode reverse. So press and hold the selection button 4. The motor is going to rotate. Here it lifted up the lifter bar with the gate and comes to a stop. So that's a quick overview to show you how you can do your test mode jog to make sure that both the left and right or forward and reverse portions of your motor are functioning correctly. Now the next option available to us is going to be test mode for the display. And this is going to allow us to test all the portions of the display to make sure every little LED segment or LCD segment is illuminating to make sure our display is reading correctly. So we need to exit test mode jog by pressing the number 1 selection button. Brings us back all the way out. We keep going a little bit more. Now we have test mode jog. Nothing on the bottom screen means that we're at the top level. Press the number 2 selection button, and here we have test mode display. We'll go ahead and press the number 4 selection button, and here it's going to illuminate every little portion of its LCD screen and make sure everything is getting illuminated. That's how simple the test mode of the display is. Now to exit, I'm going to press the number 1 selection button and bring us right back out of test mode into the displays. Now the next test mode available to us is test mode of the actual selection switches. So to get there, we need to exit test mode display, which we currently are. I'm going to press the number 2 selection button, and then here we have test mode switches. Now we need to enter test mode switches by pressing the number 4 selection button, and you know you've entered it is when it says selection 4. Now we're in the test mode of the selection switches. Now anytime I press a selection switch, the corresponding number should show on the display. So if I press selection button 1, it's going to say selection 1. If I press selection button 2, it's going to say selection 2. So here if I go down sequentially, the corresponding number should show up on the display every time I press the selection button. Here lets me know that these selection buttons are actually working. Now to exit test mode switches, you need to press and hold the number 1 selection button for an extended period of time until you see the selection or the bottom line of the display go blank. So I'm going to press and hold the number 1 selection button, and then here it's going to eventually go blank, and here I have test mode switches. Now the next test mode available to us is the test mode of the vending machine's relays it has. And there are several relays inside this machine, one for the evaporator fan, one for the compressor, as well as the lights that we can turn on and off to make sure that those relays are actually triggering on and triggering off. So I'm going to press the number 2 selection button to make my way to test mode relays. I'm going to press the number 4 selection button to enter. And then first when we come up there is compressor, and it says off. So here we can turn the compressor on and off, which is going to be opening and closing that relay. So I'm pressing the number 4 selection button, and at this point the off begins to blink. So I need to press the number 2 selection button, and here it says on. Now if I want to activate that to turn the compressor on, I need to press the number 4 selection button. So here I press selection button 4, and the compressor should turn on, which it did. Now if you've watched any of my other videos, I have a video about how to field test your compressor. And one of this shows you how to make sure that you actually have airflow to make sure your fan is working. Now your compressor may be on, but do you know if your condenser fan that pulls air through the condenser coil out the back of the machine is actually spinning? So a good way is to visual reference by taking a dollar bill and see if it gets sucked up against that coil and gets held in place, which it does. So that lets me know that that fan is actually working and pulling air through that. As well, if we let this run for an extended period of time, we'll start to get cold air forming or full ice or frost forming on our evaporator coil located at the bottom right-hand side here. So if I was to reach back here and touch these lines, I'm going to start to see that they're starting to get cold, which lets me know that we are pumping Freon through the system and that evaporator coil is getting cold. So again, this is a great way for you to perform that test on the compressor, testing the relay. So here, if I wanted to turn that off, I'm simply going to press the number 4 selection button. Here on begins to blink again. Lets me know I'm in edit mode. I press selection button 2 or 3 to cycle to off. And at this point, I'm going to press the number 4 selection button to turn the compressor off. And then here the compressor is turned off, and we know it's definitely off because the dollar bill has fallen off the condenser coil. Now under the test mode relays, we have another relay available to us, and that is the evaporator fan relay. Now what evaporator fan is that it sits behind the evaporator coil underneath the delivery chute. This is the coil that gets cold, and the evaporator fan actually circulates the cold air throughout the machine. Basically it pulls air at the bottom, blows it towards the back of the cabinet, blows it up the back wall, and comes back around. So you get an airflow something like this inside the machine. So it's always good to make sure that fan is actually turning on, because it may be hard to tell when you close the door on the machine. You can't tell if that fan's running because you have the sound of the compressor turning on. So we have that relay that we can open and close to test it. So here we got compressor. I'm going to press the number 2 selection button to cycle to our light. I'm going to go ahead and press the fan. Keep pressing number 2 until we have fan shown on the display. And then here we have fan off. So just like on the refrigeration test, if I go, or compressor test, if I press selection button 4, I have the light off begins to blink. And here I'm going to press the number 2 selection button. So it says on, press selection button 4, and that fan should turn on. So here I can actually audibly hear the fan. Again, we can do that dollar bill test as well. We can take that dollar bill and see if it gets sucked up against the coil, which it is, which lets me know that that is good to go. And then here we can check to make sure the relay does turn off. Coming back over to the front of the machine, we have fan on. If I press selection button 4, the on begins to blink. Let me know I'm in edit mode. Press selection button 2 or to get to off, and then press selection button 4, and that fan should turn off. So again, that is a quick way for you to test your evaporator fan to make sure that it is turning on and off as it should. Now the other test we have is going to be the actual light relay, and that's going to be for the LED or fluorescent bulbs inside your machine. So we go ahead and exit the, we're going to press the number 2 selection button or 3 selection button until we find the light. And here we have a light. I'm going to press the number 4 selection button, and here we have a blinking off. Press number 2 for it to say on. I'm going to press the number 4 selection button here, and it will kick on the light relay, and then here we can see the lights have been illuminated on the sign face. So this lets us know that that relay is actually opening, closing, allows us to turn the lights on and off. Press selection button 4 again, we get a blinking on. I'm going to press selection button 2 to make it go off. I'm going to go ahead and press number 4 here again, and that turns the relay off. And the lights go out. Now, last thing we have is we have the heater relay that's on this. Now this machine is not equipped with a heater. So there's an optional heater that can be placed in the machine, especially these machines are going to be operating outside in extreme cold temperatures. You might want to have a heater core in there. That is an option that you can get on the new machines when ordered. And this allows you to test that heater relay. Now there's couple of things I do want to show you as well if you do want to test your compressors. Let's say your relay is not firing, but you're not sure if your compressor is actually turning on or not. And so we can actually, on these Vendo 721s, the 621s, we can connect that compressor directly to an extension cord. Again, I'll link to the video I have above. It talks about how to field test your compressor, so you'll need to know where that plug is. And where that plug is located, it's going to be at the bottom of the machine here behind this panel. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this panel and show you exactly where that plug or the compressor actually plugs into the machine. So we're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove 4 screws here. Set this aside. And down here on the right hand side, or actually be left hand side, to the left of the compressor on the right side here, there is a single plug that you can reach in there and unplug. And it is a 2-prong plug that plugs directly into the compressor. So this plug right here is for the compressor. So we are taking an extension cord and plug this directly in. We bypass the relay and we can test the refrigeration system outside of the machine. Now, since we're down here, the last few things I wanted to point out is the actual on and off switch, which you have located here, and then we just killed power completely to the machine, as well as the fuse. Never always forget that you always once in a while check if you have no power to the machine. If you have power coming out of the outlet but no power to the machines, always want to check your fuse. And so you do have a fuse that protects the main power coming into the machine. Well, that's a quick explanation of the different test modes that you have available to you on the Gen 2 control board of a Vendo 721 and 621 drink vending machine. Again, if you found this video useful, I appreciate it if you could like and subscribe, and make sure you hit that notification bell. Until then, I'll see you on the next video. Take care.